Did you know there is a hidden PowerShell tool called MMAgent? In this video, I'll show you how to use MMAgent, or Memory Management Agent, to enhance CPU performance and free up more memory or RAM. So, what is MMAgent? MMAgent is a Windows PowerShell module that manages application launch prefetching, memory compression, operation recording, and page combining. These parameters, which can be configured within MMAgent, can impact CPU performance and RAM usage. The MMAgent module is designed to enhance responsiveness on low RAM systems by compressing low-priority data. However, it can occasionally lead to CPU performance spikes and other performance issues since it utilizes system resources. If MMAgent is not configured properly for your system, it may negatively affect your system's performance. Like my other video about pcgaming, configuring MMAgent is similar, but this module or utility is accessed through PowerShell instead of the command prompt. Before we proceed, it's important to note that configuring MMAgent, or the Memory Management Agent, is completely safe and reversible. It will not cause issues with your operating system or result in any data loss, but it's always best to keep a backup recovery such as a restore point. To open MMAgent, press the Windows key +R, type PowerShell, and then press Ctrl+Shift+Enter to run PowerShell as an administrator. Once PowerShell is open, type get MMAgent. This command will display all the parameters in MMAgent along with their current values for your system. It is also highly recommended to take a screenshot of these settings. This will serve as a reference in case you want to revert them back to their default values later on. Now let's take a closer look at each parameter or setting. Application Launch Prefetching. This feature is designed to speed up app startup times by loading portions of applications into RAM before you actually open them. Here's how it works. It monitors the apps you use most frequently and preloads some of their data into your RAM, even if you haven't accessed the app yet. As a result, when you do open these apps, you may experience faster loading times. However, while this feature enhances application boot times, it consumes RAM and disk space, which can range from a few megabytes to several hundred megabytes. Additionally, it utilizes some CPU resources and system resources, similar to other parameters that will be mentioned. If you check the memory section in Task Manager, you might notice something labeled Cached Memory. If application launch prefetching is enabled, set to true, there's a good chance that some of this cached memory is a result of this feature. I recommend setting application launch prefetching to false to prevent it from using system resources, thereby freeing up RAM, disk space, and reducing background CPU usage. Additionally, disabling this feature is beneficial if you want to prevent Windows from tracking your frequently used apps. To disable application launch prefetching, use the following command: disable MMAgent application launch prefetching. You shouldn't encounter an error like this on your PowerShell. The error is only appearing for me because I'm using a modified version of Windows, and that feature is already disabled on my Windows. Application Pre-Launch. This feature is similar to application launch prefetching. It monitors the applications you frequently use. However, the key difference is that application pre-launch not only preloads the data but also starts the apps you often use in the background, keeping them in a suspended state, much like when you minimize an application. For example, if you frequently use Discord and notice that it starts up faster than usual, this may be due to the application pre-launch feature. This process also consumes system resources such as RAM, disk space, and CPU power, which the RAM usage can be also reflected as cached memory in the Task Manager. I recommend setting this feature to false to free up system resources and to prevent Windows from monitoring your application usage. To disable application pre-launch, type disable MMAgent application pre-launch. Memory compression. Among all the parameters discussed in this video, memory compression is the most significant when it comes to performance tuning. This feature increases the available RAM by compressing inactive data stored in your RAM instead of sending it to a slower storage option like a page file. When the data is needed again, it is decompressed for use. While enabling memory compression does save RAM, it has a trade-off. It consumes CPU resources because the CPU is responsible for both compressing and decompressing the data. If your PC has 16 GB of RAM or more, I recommend disabling memory compression by setting it to false. This will reduce CPU overhead, resulting in better CPU performance and lower latency. However, if your system has 8 GB of RAM or less and frequently runs out of available RAM, it's advisable to leave memory compression enabled, true. This way, you avoid potential issues caused by insufficient RAM, though it is up to you to decide whether you want to prioritize CPU performance or have more free RAM space. To disable memory compression, you can use one of the following commands: disable MMAgent MC or disable MMAgent memory compression. Page combining. This is a feature that scans RAM for duplicate data and combines them to reduce RAM usage. While this can help lower RAM consumption, it also increases CPU overhead because the CPU must frequently scan for duplicate data and combine it, which can lead to decreased CPU performance. I recommend setting this feature to false to minimize CPU overhead and background activity, allowing your CPU to perform at its best and reducing latency. However, if you have only 8 GB of RAM and are experiencing full RAM usage, you may want to leave it set to the default, or true. Ultimately, the decision again depends on whether you prioritize CPU performance or additional free RAM space. To disable page combining, type disable MMAgent page combining. Operation API. This feature is primarily for telemetry purposes. It tracks your activity by logging which files and applications you have opened and which files apps have accessed. You can think of it as a flight data recorder for your computer, similar to an airplane's black box. Even if you delete files or attempt to clear your activity, this log is still stored on your PC containing information such as when you have accessed an app, file, and other things that can be tracked. Additionally, since this parameter is related to telemetry, it also sends your information to Microsoft. Because it continuously tracks and logs data, it can increase CPU overhead and consume disk space in the background, leading to reduced overall performance for both the CPU and your drives. To disable this feature, you can type disable MMAgent Operation API. To reiterate, since I'm using a modded version of Windows, the error is specific to my setup, and it should not show in yours. Lastly, we have max Operation API files. This sets the buffer limit for Operation API. This parameter defines the maximum number of files that Operation API can track. If Operation API is disabled or set to false, there is no need to configure this setting, as it will have no effect since Operation API is already turned off. If you're unsure about which configuration to use, here are my recommendations. If you have more than 16 GB of RAM or typically do not experience your RAM reaching 100% usage, and you want to prioritize CPU performance and lower latency, set the following options to false. By doing this, you will eliminate unnecessary CPU and system resource overhead caused by MMAgent, leading to better performance and reduced latency during gaming. If you have less than 8 GB of RAM and experiencing full RAM usage, and you don't mind using some CPU power and system resources to free up RAM, consider the following configuration. This configuration helps you keep some RAM free by compressing and combining it, while still maintaining low CPU and system resource overhead. Note that enabling memory compression and page combining may still use some system resources. Once you have completed the configuration, type get MMAgent again to see if the parameters value has changed, and restart your PC for the changes to take effect. To enable or revert changes by adjusting the parameters, simply replace disable in the command. For example, you would use enable MMAgent memory compression. Regarding comparisons, there are no standardized benchmarks or tests available, as performance can vary greatly depending on your hardware and PC specifications. I recommend conducting your own tests and benchmarks to compare the stock MMAgent configuration with your tweaked configuration in order to observe the differences. I hope this guide helps you and gives you an understanding how the MMAgent feature in Windows works. With that said, this concludes the video. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comments section, and I will do my best to answer them. Thank you for watching.